The rumor going around on the streets, well, it's that Johnny Walker might be back. And that is because he is coming off of a massive second round knockout against the undefeated in the UFC Zhang Mingyang, who is on a multi-year, I believe 12-fight first round win streak. This was Johnny Walker's first win since May 13th of 2023 against Anthony Lionheart Smith. Since then, he had lost 2 fights in a row to Magomed Ankalaev and Volkan Oezdemir and had that wacky no contest against Ankalaev as well. So on top of not having any momentum heading into this bout against Zhang Mingyang, in enemy territory mind you, in China, but he also hadn't fought since last June, meaning that he was on a 14-month hiatus. I said on the preview leading into this fight that if Johnny Walker lost, I wouldn't have been surprised if this was his last light heavyweight bout and the rest of his career would have played out in the heavyweight division. But now, not only is he holding his spot in the top 15 of the light heavyweight ranks, but he possibly just put himself up for a big-time fight in his next outing that can put him closer than he has ever been before to light heavyweight title contention, because the deck couldn't have been more stacked against Johnny Walker, and he knocked that castle of cards down here, taking out the surging Zhang Mingyang in front of his home country, and picked up his 17th knockout victory of his career as well. And Johnny is still just 33 years old, so yes, we've seen him for years and years at this point in the UFC and off of the Dana White Contender Series fight years ago, but for most fighters, he is in his prime, and it helps when he's in the light heavyweight division and not cutting as much weight. Here I am again, once more believing in the hype that is Johnny Walker, because sometimes he can put together these types of performances where not only does he find himself not in much danger, but he gets big time finishes and looks great en route to doing so. I was very much anticipating a first round finish for Zhang Mingyang. He had just looked so cool, calm, and composed throughout his first 3 UFC bouts and is known for his 100% finishing prowess. But this just proved to be too big of a jump, going from Anthony Smith, who was in his retirement bout when losing to Zhang, to Johnny Walker, who yes, did not have any momentum, but is in his true fighting physical prime. I would love to hear your thoughts on this performance from Johnny Walker and what you think could be next for him in this light heavyweight division, because we've got a lot of pieces that are already put together. We have the rematch coming on October 4th between Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Pereira for the championship. We've got Jiri Prochazka slated to take on Khalil Rountree on that very same night. That's number 2 versus number 4. And we've also got Carlos Alberg, who sits at number 3 and is on a massive win streak right now, taking on Dominic Reyes, who is in the middle of a career resurgence. They're main eventing at the end of September in Perth, Australia. And of course, now we have Johnny Walker with this knockout win over Zhang Mingyang, who sits at number 13, and maybe he just has to wait a few months to see how these pieces play out ahead of him. But it's also possible that he could take on someone like a number 10 ranked Bogdan Guskov, or maybe someone as high as the number 6 ranked former champion Jamal Hill, who finds himself on a bit of a skid right now, but still has obviously a big name in this division. Be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think should be next for Johnny Walker after this massive bounce back victory. There was a lot of drama surrounding the co-main event on the weigh-in day on Friday because Brian Ortega once again had his issues getting down to the featherweight limit, and as a matter of fact, at one point was rumored to have fainted backstage, was taken to a hospital, but then all of a sudden he shows up to the weigh-ins looking like a zombie, could barely make his way to the face-off with Aljamain, and then they fight at a catch weight of 153 pounds. And it seemed pretty clear in the performance from Ortega that this weight cut absolutely drained him, and he had hardly nothing to offer, as he would lose a very clear 50-45 decision to Aljamain Sterling, who had a big win and is now 2-1 since joining the 145-pound weight class. In terms of total strikes landed, Aljamain outlanded Ortega 153-100, but when you look at the significant strikes, that is where there is a much larger discrepancy, as 124 strikes from Aljamain were significant, whereas just 55 were deemed significant from Ortega, the former title challenger. Aljamain would also mix in 3 takedowns in this bout and rack up nearly 4 minutes of control time. Obviously, that's not a ton over the course of 25 minutes, but it was a very impressive, complete performance from the former bantamweight champion, and he wouldn't allow the boxing of Ortega to damage him too badly, and he wouldn't allow himself to be threatened by the jiu-jitsu skills of Ortega either. I had a feeling that a majority of this fight would take place in the striking realm just because of the pedigrees that these two both hold down on the mat, but I also said that I felt Ortega would get the upper hand and if it came down to a striking matchup, and I was proved wrong here by Sterling. So in terms of takeaways from this bout, 1, Brian Ortega is done at featherweight. He should absolutely be having his next fight at the lightweight division. At this point, he's talked about it for his last 3 fights and still hasn't committed to it. I think it's pretty clear that now, if he wants to at least keep his job in the UFC, he's got to move to lightweight to finish his career. And for Aljamain Sterling, I feel like he's already proved that he belongs amongst the elite contenders at 145, being that he beat Calvin Kattar very convincingly in his featherweight debut, and then had a very fun back and forth matchup with the undefeated Movsar Evloev, who was in the top 5. And now a fight that I would absolutely love to see next for Aljamain Sterling in the aftermath of this Ortega victory is someone who is a familiar foe to Ortega, and that is the former interim title challenger and number 3 ranked Yair Rodriguez. Because now that I feel with near a 100% certainty that he will not be getting Alexander Volkanovski next, that will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, Lerone Murphy, it makes all the sense in the world to have a former interim champion, Yair, who sits at number 3, taking on the former bantamweight champion turned featherweight title hopeful Aljamain Sterling in a 5-round main event. Or, of course, a featured bout on a big pay-per-view too. That works. Yair should absolutely not be fighting for that championship next because he's coming off of just 1 win, and that was against Patricio Pitbull in his UFC debut. But if he can tally together back-to-back wins with that second one being against Sterling, then he has a legitimate argument. But I still wouldn't put him over someone like a Movsar Evloev, just saying. And if Aljamain Sterling can beat Calvin Kattar, who's in the top 15, can beat Brian Ortega, who's in the top 5, and then beat Yair, who's in the top 3, he's all but certain to get a title fight. Again, maybe not putting him above Movsar either, considering Movsar beat him, but you get the point. But do you agree with my matchmaking? Let me know down in the comments below. And we had a big-time matchup in the heavyweight division, maybe not in terms of the action that we saw in the cage, but in terms of their implications and stakes and rankings in the top 5. And that was between the number 3 ranked former interim title challenger Sergei Pavlovich and the number 6 ranked Waldo Cortes-Acosta, who had won his last 5 bouts in a row. And now we know here in the aftermath that Pavlovich was able to get the job done over the course of a 15-minute back-and-forth striking affair, which now moves his win streak to 2 in a row because he beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik at the beginning of the year back in February. So regardless of what we want to make of the performances from Sergei and how it's no longer what he used to be, which was an absolute first-round killing machine knocking out everyone in his path, he is still racking together wins and keeping his career intact after losing back-to-back fights to Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov in 2023 and 2024. And Sergei is still just 33 years old. He's 20-3 overall, so who's to say he can't get back to his finishing ways? I was hopeful that maybe it was here against Waldo, but Cortes-Acosta just proved to be too durable. But now I'm going to be very curious to see how the UFC plays Pavlovich moving forward because he sits at number 3, but we have a title fight between Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall happening at the end of October, and we have the number 1 contender fight happening on the same card between Alexander Volkov and Jailton Almeida. So it's possible that Pavlovich will have to fight backward a little bit in the rankings, maybe having a rematch with someone like a Curtis Blades, or maybe even having the long overdue Sergei versus Sergei matchup, Sergei Pavlovich versus Sergei the Polar Bear Spivak. And from a storyline perspective, there isn't a ton more to discuss on this card, but I have to give shine to the big winners and the folks that had some big-time finishes. The 24-year-old Super Saiyan, Naraji Talyilake, earned a first-round finish in his UFC debut against Kiefer Crosby, and he is now 12-1 with a 100% finish rate, 11 knockouts, and 1 submission. And of course, he got the job done in front of his Chinese home crowd. Charles Johnson defended his number 15 ranking, which I had a feeling heading into this card that he would do, and he did so by handing Lonier Kavanaugh the first loss of his professional career. And don't sleep on Charles Johnson because the man has won 5 of his last 6 bouts dating back to February of 2024, meaning that he is also staying insanely active. Kyle Daukaus made good on his second stint in the UFC by winning his re-debut, and he did it in fashion with a first-round knockout in what just took 43 seconds over Michel Pereira, who now finds himself on a 3-fight skid. Kyle Daukaus was released from the promotion following his December 2022 loss to Eric Anders, but would make good on his run throughout the regional scene, racking up 4 consecutive fights and victories in Cage Fury, with 3 of those 4 coming by way of stoppage, and now he makes his win streak 5 by cashing as more than a plus 200 underdog against Pereira and finishing him in fashion. We had another sub 1 minute finish just below the Kyle Daukaus one, and that was from Yi Zha, who finished Weston Wilson via first round knockout in 37 seconds. This man is just 28 years old, but has 31 professional fights with a 26-5 record. He's finished 20 out of those 26 wins, and he is a 2024 Road to UFC champion. And lastly, the Gorilla, Uran Saudi Baldayev, improved to 9-1 after getting a first round Ezekiel choke finish over Dayar Nurgazai. He's 31 years old, right in his prime. He's finished 7 of his 9 wins, and the only loss of his career was to Martin Budai, who was a top 15 heavyweight before being released for no rhyme or reason. So I want to hear from you down in the comments below. Give me your biggest takeaways from UFC Shanghai and what some of your favorite notable performances were as well, and matchmake for some of the big winners while you're at it. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because we are currently on the road to reaching 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and any and all support would be greatly appreciated. Alongside recaps of the most meaningful results, I also break down and preview the biggest and best fights and storylines heading into each card, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcasts release there. Have a great week, and I will see you all in the next video.